Hi, guys, and welcome to the Horror Room. So, a few weeks ago, we did a versus video with Eli Roth's films versus Rob Zombie's films, kind of to sort out who the worst of the worst is, at least in my opinion. But we did look at some production costs versus, the box office money they made back for their films, plus what the audience, like the average audience score for each movie was. So I thought, hey, that was a pretty fun idea. Let's do it, but with two of the greatest directors of all time. And if you can't tell, I'm kind of wearing both because I can't pick one. They're great. So I got the Freddy sweater for good old Wes Craven, and then I've got the Halloween shirt for John Carpenter. Who else? So today we're going to take a look at five of the movies from Wes Craven and John Carpenter's filmography. Um, there's a lot to choose from. I had to boil it down to just five movies. Um, and last time we had some outliers in those five, like ones that kind of don't fit with the other ones. This one, they're mainly all horror or horror adjacent. So it was a little harder to do that, but I think in terms of familiarity and popularity, you'll see that some of these are a little bit of underdog films. But let's stop yapping and let's start looking. So I got it all wrote down, and I'm going to talk to you about it. We're going to start with the earliest film. We're going to do Wes Craven to John Carpenter. Um, so whoever put out their film first, I'll talk about it. We'll talk about different things that I like about each movie, and then I'm going to decide which film I like more, and in the end, we'll decide who I think was the better director. Anyways, Wes Craven's Last House on the Left came out in 1972, and most of these are approximate values, by the way, for the production costs. So the production cost for this was between $87,000 and $90,000. So pretty low budget, but it ended up making $3 million. So it tripled its budget, like actually a little bit more than triple its budget. So that's pretty good. That's pretty admirable for a low budget movie. And Sean Cunningham, who made the Friday the 13th movie, was behind helping produce it with Wes Craven. Now the audience score is 50%, so that means the audience is divided, and due to the nature of Last House on the Left, it's understandable. Um, like I think Wes Craven was just breaking into the scene. He wanted to get his foot in the door with something. Yeah, so not bad. The audience score. Now I will say for the Last House on the Left, the things I like about it is I think his name is David Hess. Maybe it's Jared Hess. It's one of those. But the main villain, he also appears in the movie House by the Edge of the Park. Fantastic actor. Unfortunately, he has to play these types of roles, but in terms of making you hate a villain, he perfected his acting for that. So I think he's a great actor in both of those films. But Last House on the Left was, at least to my knowledge, one of his breakthroughs for horror. Um, then later on in 1978, now just a note, Wes Craven had made two movies before John Carpenter had made his first horror film. So, but we'll get to that when we pit the next two against each other. But for right now, Last House on the Left is going up against Halloween, 1978. That's a pretty big contender. And Halloween had a slightly bigger budget, 325,000, and that's because I think it was Compass International, Mustafa Akkad's production company, helped with the budget. Um, so they got pretty lucky to get that little extra boost in money. They did cut a lot of corners. There's the infamous, William Shatner mask that they used. I think they were originally going to use like a clown mask, but they swapped it last minute. And boom, history's made. We got Michael Myers. Um, So on that $325,000 budget, they made $70 million. Now, when I'm talking about the return profit, we're talking like worldwide, uh, kind of a amalgamation of everything. I was originally just going to do domestic, but I don't think that's fair to discredit how popular these movies are or aren't worldwide. And audience score, it has an 89%. So a lot of the audience score, it's not perfect. That could probably be due to some of the dialogue, Linda saying totally like a million times, seeing palm trees in the background, things that, people have noticed more over the years, but there's no denying that. It's got Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, two phenomenal actors that literally ground you into the story. Um, so yeah, between Last House on the Left and Halloween, come on, it's gonna be obvious. It's gonna be Halloween. I know a lot of people have said over recent years that Halloween is boring, it's slow, but to them, I think there's different assets to horror, not just gore and violence. And yes, Halloween had some jump scares, even. If you think about the original Halloween, it had some jump scares, and people criticize jump scares, but there was a lot of suspense. There's a lot of atmosphere and mood, and Michael Myers is very creepy in that movie. The way he sneaks around, you see him, but you don't really see him too much um, until the last half of the movie. But yeah, I can rave about Halloween all day, obviously, but we're gonna move on. Next, we have The Hills Have Eyes, which came out in 1977. Again, Wes Craven had two horror movies out before John Carpenter had Halloween out. Um, Now, the budget for this was approximately 230,000. So it looks like the bit of financial success they had for Last House on the Left allowed him to get a little bit of a bigger budget, and that paid off so well because Hills Have Eyes had a $25 million profit off of 230,000. So that's already a fraction of a million. And then if you reach that million and you multiply it by 25, this movie was a magnificent success for Wes Craven. Um, a lot more so than Last House on the Left because it did have its fair touchy matter in that movie, but the story was more of a story. It wasn't like, hey, we're gonna drag this girl out to the woods and do terrible things. It's like, no, we're gonna drag her out to the desert and make her family and join in. Um, but the audience score for Hills Have Eyes is 54%, little higher than the score for Last House on the Left. But again, I can see why that score is a little low because those moments, even though they are a lot fewer than the last movie, they are very graphic. Well, not like super graphic, but they're very emotional. Um, so I can see audiences not meshing with that very well. Even nowadays, it is a great movie. It's a classic, but those scenes do get uncomfortable. Plus, I know the original compared to the remake, it was I don't know. It just felt more like going scene to scene rather than a story and investing in the characters. I personally do love the movie though. I have the Arrow release. I have the poster on my wall. It's a great movie, and I can't remember his name now. Michael something. Michael Berryman, who played the main cannibal, hill folk guy from Hills Have Eyes. Iconic in the horror scene. But then we move to the other side for John Carpenter. In 1980, he released The Fog, which is, a very divisive movie, to say the least. Um, it's more of a classic kind of gothic atmosphere, a little bit of a ghost story, if you will. Uh, but based on the success of Halloween, he received not immediate success, but uh, he received a $1.1 million budget for The Fog. So I think this was more of a instance where they're like, okay, we saw you make us a bunch of money. Here's some extra money to do something that you want to do. So he did The Fog. He also did another movie, which we're going to be talking about here in a bit. Uh, but a $1.1 million budget, and the box office for it, for the returns, is $21.4 million. So again, he takes this minuscule budget, um, which we just talked about, the 325,000 for Halloween, and turned it into 70 million. That's huge. The Fog was a little less than that, but it's still, he increased it like over 20 times. So 21.4 million out of 1.1 million, pretty damn good. Audience score, this one has a little lesser score than Halloween, 65%. I can personally see why. Like I said, it's kind of a slow movie. It's more ghostly. I do like some of the elements near the end when you get to see like the they're like pirates basically, but they're in the fog, of course. Because it's after, before you just think it's like a killer fog or something, but there's something in the fog. That's the tagline. But if I have to compare The Hills Have Eyes and The Fog, I personally am more entertained by The Hills Have Eyes. It's just an instance where Wes Craven was starting to develop his footing when it comes to characters and stories. And I think there's a little more substance there, even though a lot of people don't see it that way. But I do enjoy it, The Hills Have Eyes. So next, moving on, John Carpenter got the earlier movie Now, and when he did 1982's The Thing, which is a remake. And of course, infamously in Halloween, John Carpenter has The Thing playing on the TV when little Lindsay Wallace and Tommy Doyle are being babysit by Laurie Strode. They're watching The Thing on TV. Now, the budget for this was $15 million. So John Carpenter at this point had already established himself, and they said, you know what, we trust you. Here's $15 million. Let's see what you got. And apparently he only spent a fraction of that budget on the special effects, which if you've seen The Thing is baffling that it was not at least half the budget. But you do got to think he had, oh, fuck, what's his name? Oh, shoot, I'm trying to remember his name now. Kurt Russell. Yeah, Kurt Russell. Maybe, I don't know if he was such a big name back then, but he became a big name, especially through John Carpenter films. But the box office for The Thing is $20.8 million. So they barely made their budget back and then a little extra. So it was a huge flop at the box office. But this is a movie that went down in horror history, so to speak, later on, and became one of the biggest cult classics. And people love The Thing, and I'm one of them. Honestly, like, it's a movie that can't be topped. Like, they tried to do a remake, prequel type thing in, like, I think it was 2011, and nobody talks about that fucking movie. But they always talk about John Carpenter's The Thing because it's magnificent. And that's why it has the highest audience rating on this whole list of 92%. And that's including Wes Craven films. So that just goes to show you that people love this movie. They might not have loved it back in the day, but they obviously have turned around and come to its defense now. But then in 1984, Wes Craven said, "Hold my beer," and dropped Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the most prolific slashers in horror cinema. Freddy Krueger in the first film. And this is back when Freddy was more terrifying and creepy instead of throwing, one-liners out and being known for his catchphrase of bitch. So Nightmare on Elm Street had a pretty substantial budget compared to the last two. It had a $1.8 million budget. And it made a box office return of $57 million. That's the highest one so far for Wes Craven anyways. So hadn't quite reached the level of Halloween, but still, Freddy came out swinging. And the audience score is the highest for Wes Craven, which is 84%, which is kind of surprising to me, but I guess you can look at some of the sillier moments in the first Elm Street movie, like the ending, obviously, where the mother gets ripped through the window. Um, but a lot of the silliness, the unintentional silliness, because they were trying to take it very seriously, um, at least in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, I can forgive it because the whole movie has like a very dreamlike quality, which fits in with the narrative. And, if you can't like kind of say, oh, people have weird dreams all the time, it fits in. Um, Now, between Nightmare on Elm Street and The Thing, which one is my favorite? That is hard. That is hard. But I think I'm gonna have to give it to The Thing. Because The Thing, just the practical effects in that movie are mind blowing. The tension, the isolation, the paranoia is just on full blast in that movie. Whereas, Nightmare on Elm Street, it has its tension, it has its horror, but it's more subdued. It's more of a character, development, and you get to know Nancy and see all this stuff happening to her. Whereas in The Thing, it's kind of hard to latch on to one person because you can't really trust anyone until the final moments of the movie when you know that, well, I mean, you think you know that someone or something is not possessed. Which there's a lot of speculation about that ending, but that's what makes it so fun. Plus the setting of like the Arctic area and just how alone and trapped you'd be. At least in Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy has her friends to fall on, even though that doesn't really work out too well. um, but yeah. So then next up for the 1987 release of Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter. It had a $3 million budget. Now, that is a huge drop from The Thing, but I'm very surprised that it's still in the millions because of how financially unsuccessful. Now, John Carpenter had built his name up. Halloween is probably the one that kept his name in the public's eyes a lot, along with They Live, which we didn't talk about, but that was another big, great movie. I don't know how financially successful it was because I didn't look that one up. I wanted to keep it mostly horror for this one. But on its $3 million budget, Prince of Darkness had a $14.2 million return. And that is not bad. That's a lot better than The Thing did. Audience score, it's a 61%, so it's a little divisive. I can personally see why, because this is a movie that I've watched multiple times. I have it in my collection, but I honestly can say that it's just never really grabbed hold of me. And it has Donald Pleasance in it. It's got Alice Cooper, who plays like a weird homeless man. And it's got these themes of, good versus evil. And it's a unique idea. It's just, I don't know, somewhere before the halfway point, I kind of start zoning out. I kind of start losing interest. And I always just kind of like space out on the rest of the movie. But then we go to 1991, Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. It had a $6 million production cost, so by this point, people trusted Wes Craven's name, and with good reason because it made $31.3 million back. So that's pretty damn good. Especially for a movie that a lot of people I don't hear talk about, People Under the Stairs. And it's got a 61% audience score. So Prince of Darkness and People Under the Stairs are basically on the same level in terms of people liking them or not. Now, it has been a while since I've seen People Under the Stairs, but I would be more willing to go back to that movie. In fact, let's see if I can pull it out. Oh, I don't know where it is. I thought it was over here. It's probably put away. But I think I'd be more interested to sit down and watch that over Prince of Darkness. Because I've seen that more, but I could tell you less about it. But People Under the Stairs, I remember, even though it's not really a straight up horror movie, it has some, moments in it that are fun. And Wes Craven is really good at writing characters, especially by this point. He's had some bad moments here and there. One we didn't mention was Deadly Friend. Um, so I think if I had to choose between these two, it'd be People Under the Stairs. Like I said, even though I've seen both of them probably at less than anything on this list, um, I can still comfortably say that People Under the Stairs I know I'd be more interested in. Um, so finally, we get down to the last two. John Carpenter's Village of the Damned came out in 1995. It had a $22 million budget, the highest budget out of all these films for John Carpenter. Man, if you thought The Thing was a financial disaster, at least it made its budget back. Village of the Damned made $9.4 million off of $22 million. It didn't even make its budget back. And it had Christopher Reeves in it, which he wasn't really big in the horror scene. He was more, a superhero known for playing Superman. But obviously, the last two Superman movies were crap. So I don't know if that tarnished his reputation. Maybe he did something or did some other movies that people were like, ugh. This might have been a chance for him to try to, break into a different genre and reestablish himself. I will say I did like his performance in this movie, and it was a fun, creepy, classic vibe. Definitely felt like something that you'd see on The Twilight Zone. Actually, I think there was an episode in The Twilight Zone about, creepy kids and stuff. This whole movie could have been based off a Twilight Zone episode. I can't remember. I'm no expert on Twilight Zone myself. But this had an audience score of 28%, the lowest audience score. I guess I can see why. Because in the 90s, that's when John Carpenter's movie career really started to descend. There was a couple ones that came out that, were the exception to the rule. I think Body Bags is criminally underrated. If you haven't seen John Carpenter's Body Bags and you like anthology movies, give it a watch. I'd say pair that up with the Tobe Hooper anthology movie, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it has the snakes coming out of the guy's eyes. I should do that. I should do a double feature of those someday. But then in 1996, Scream from Wes Craven burst onto the scene. I almost said the Scream. And this redefined the genre, which was already kind of faltering at that point. Maybe that is a reason for some of Village of the Damned's unsuccess, as it were. But Scream basically came and did gangbusters because on a $15 million budget, it made $173 million. So out of all the movies on this list, Scream is the most successful out of either side. There's no denying that. The audience score, though, is surprising. I thought it was a lot higher. It's only 80%. So I'm baffled by that, and maybe it's because people were a little burnt out by 90s horror movies. Because, by 96, there wasn't a ton, but Scream definitely did open the gates for everything. Like I said, that was during the time when, horror wasn't as popular. Now, Scream did make it more popular going forward, but due to this audience score, it's kind of crazy to think that it's not at least a 90%. But out of Scream and Village of the Damned, obviously I have to give it to Scream because it's a very entertaining movie. Lots of likable characters. Ghostface is truly one of the more iconic slashers to be birthed in the 90s. And with that, I chose The Hills Have Eyes, People Under the Stairs, and Scream. And for John Carpenter, I only chose Halloween and The Thing. So I'm surprised, but it looks like I really think Wes Craven won. No, yeah, granted, if I'd put They Live on there, or, something else that I liked from John Carpenter. But when I make these lists, I'm not like, yeah, let me put all my favorites. I'm going by their filmography and saying, what movies stand out, which movies aren't not like sequels or, I could have put Nightmare on Elm Street 3 on there, and it would have been a wash. But I didn't want to do that. So kind of try to balance it out between the two. Give each director their moment to shine. And John Carpenter started off pretty damn strong, but Freddy has staying power. Ghostface has staying power. And when you look at Ghostface and Freddy, the franchises as a whole, they've had less sequels that have been blasted compared to Halloween. Halloween 3, uh, Halloween 5, Halloween 6, Resurrection, the Rob Zombie movies, the Gordon Green movies. Halloween has had tons of, you know, controversies. Yes, Michael Myers is an icon, but when you look at Freddy and you look at Ghostface, their films, their series aren't as huge as Michael Myers, but they don't have a lot of films in them that people hate. Like, yeah, you can point to Scream 3, it's not that good. You can point to The Dream Child or Freddy's Dead. But even though those movies aren't as popular, they're less of a mess than the Michael Myers ones. And I think the audience agrees. I think I agree. And like I said, I'm very surprised by that because I like Wes Craven movies, but I didn't think I was that into them till I sat down and made this list and compared this stuff. So I think this was a lot of fun. Now, I don't think we're going to be doing, the director's versus thing a ton. I do have one more in mind, which I'm not sure when we'll get to it. Maybe it'll be next week, maybe in a few weeks. It just depends when I feel like filming it. But I think if I'm going to do one more, because there's a lot of horror directors or directors that do horror, but they don't specifically do horror. So it's hard to compare. And I want to keep it focused. I'm not going to do like, John Landis did a couple good horror movies, but that wasn't the bulk of his career. I could do Richard Band from Puppet Master versus Lloyd Kaufman. But again, horror is not like the main thing they focus on, even though there are horror elements to both of their movies. Maybe in the future I will do Richard Band versus Lloyd Kaufman. If I do, I'll have to think about that one because they have a long list that I'd have to say, okay, which ones? Obviously, Toxic Avenger and Puppet Master, of course. But they probably wouldn't face off because the years are different. But for the next one, I'm going to be doing Lucio Fulci versus George Romero. I think that one's going to be a lot of fun, even though George Romero's career is primarily zombie films, and I'm trying to keep the movies different. I'm probably going to pick 2 movies that are zombie films and 3 that aren't. And then for Fulci, obviously I have to choose zombie as one of them. But he has a lot of more varied, interesting movies in his career that are horror that I can, use. And the Gates of Hell trilogy will probably be mostly included. So, yeah, spoilers. Because they don't have very big filmographies for either one of them in terms of horror. I know Fulci had a huge filmography, but he didn't really get started with horror until zombie. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit about some of these movies. And we took a look at, what the audience preferred, what I preferred. And, maybe you guys like some of the movies I didn't like. Maybe you prefer John Carpenter. I know most people do. But I think I'm honestly surprised, like I said, that I should watch a lot more Wes Craven movies. I have a ton that I haven't seen that weren't listed on here that I still need to check out, like Shocker, The Serpent and the Rainbow. I haven't seen that. So yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. And I know I did watch all the John Carpenter movies before. I did a marathon, at least for horror. I didn't watch a lot of his action movies, which I've heard good things about, most of them. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.